In June 2001, 17-year-old jockey Ryan Murphy achieved a stunning upset victory at Belmont Park. Hours after the celebration in the winner's circle, he walked back to the locker room and was never seen again. For 3 years, the case remained cold, another unsolved New York City disappearance. That changed when health inspectors condemned an industrial slaughterhouse in Queens. What a sanitation crew found concealed inside a wall would prove the young jockey's disappearance was a calculated act to protect a secret hidden within the world of horse racing. The high-pitched scream of the circular saw was the only thing that felt real. Liam Murphy pressed the blade into the oak plank, the resistance vibrating up his arms, the scent of sawdust filling his nostrils. It was grounding, this noise, this physical exertion. On the renovation site in Brooklyn, surrounded by the skeletal frames of unfinished walls and the constant hammering of the crew, Liam could almost forget why he was there. He could almost forget the silence that had defined the past 3 years. Since June 2001, since his younger brother Ryan, the jockey with the bright future and the easy smile, had vanished from Belmont Park, Liam's life had narrowed to this: grueling labor by day, futile searching by night. He finished the cut and wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of a dusty glove. The August heat was already oppressive, trapped within the half-finished structure. He measured the next plank, his movements economical, practiced. He preferred the heavy work, the kind that left him too exhausted to think. Thinking led him back to the track, back to the winner's circle, back to the unanswered questions that gnawed at the edges of his sanity. Ryan was 17. 17-year-olds didn't just evaporate. Murphy, the site foreman, Sal, bellowed over the din. Sal was a thick-necked man with a permanent scowl, but he knew Liam was the hardest worker on the crew. Liam looked up, shielding his eyes from the glare filtering through the plastic sheeting covering the windows. Sal pointed toward the street entrance. "You got visitors." "Suits." Liam's stomach tightened. Suits rarely meant good news in his world. He nodded, placing the plank down carefully, and started making his way through the obstacle course of equipment and debris. He pulled off his gloves, tucking them into his back pocket, aware of the dust clinging to his jeans and the sweat staining his t-shirt. Downstairs, standing near the temporary entrance, were 2 men who looked distinctly out of place amidst the construction chaos. They wore the standard uniform of NYPD detectives, conservative ties, jackets slightly rumpled from the heat, expressions carefully neutral. Liam recognized the look. He'd seen it 3 years ago when the initial investigation had ground to a halt, when the sympathy had curdled into impatience. He approached them, his boots heavy on the concrete floor. The older of the 2 stepped forward. He was tall, with thinning gray hair and eyes that seemed to have seen everything and liked none of it. "Liam Murphy?" the detective asked, his voice a low gravel. "That's me?" The detective extended his hand. "Detective Jack Callahan, NYPD Homicide." He indicated his younger partner, Detective Miller. Homicide. The word landed like a physical blow. For 3 years, Ryan had been a missing person. The shift in terminology felt seismic. Liam's throat constricted. "Homicide? Why are you here?" Callahan watched him closely, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Murphy, we need you to come with us to Queens. There's been a development." "A development? What kind of development? Did you find him?" The questions spilled out, frantic, desperate. Callahan hesitated, a flicker of something that might have been compassion crossing his features before settling back into professional detachment. "A facility inspection uncovered something related to your brother's case." "What? Tell me now." Liam took a step closer, his voice raw. "It's better if we discuss it on the way," Callahan said firmly, "but I need to prepare you. Yesterday, during an inspection of a meatpacking facility in Queens, they found a jockey's helmet. We have reason to believe it was Ryan's." The world seemed to tilt. A jockey's helmet in a meatpacking plant? The implications were horrific, nonsensical. Liam felt a wave of nausea wash over him. He leaned against a nearby stack of drywall, struggling to breathe. 3 years of agonizing ambiguity, of clinging to the faintest hope that Ryan might have run away, started to crumble. "Let's go," Liam said, his voice barely a whisper. The drive to Queens was agonizing. Liam sat in the back of the unmarked sedan, the city scrolling past the window in a blur of traffic and noise. Callahan tried to provide context, his voice droning on about health code violations and mandatory inspections, but Liam barely heard him. His mind was racing, trying to connect the vibrant image of his brother, the silks, the speed, the triumph, with the grim reality of a slaughterhouse. They pulled into an industrial area, a landscape of warehouses, loading docks, and chain-link fences. The air hung heavy with the metallic tang of industry, and something else, something vaguely unpleasant lurking beneath the surface. They stopped in front of an aging brick building with faded lettering. A&R Meatpacking. A large yellow condemnation notice was plastered across the main entrance. The facility was shuttered, silent. Crime scene tape crisscrossed the loading dock. Several uniformed officers stood guard, their expressions grim. The smell of industrial cleaner was overwhelming, a harsh chemical scent that did little to mask the underlying odor of decay. Liam stepped out of the car, his legs unsteady. The reality of the location hit him with full force. A slaughterhouse. The word itself felt violent, brutal. "This way," Callahan said, leading him toward a side entrance. The detective seemed to understand the weight of the moment. His usual brusqueness softened slightly. "I know this is difficult, Mr. Murphy, but we need your help to confirm what we found." Liam nodded mutely, following Callahan into the cold, sterile environment, the bright fluorescent lights reflecting off the stainless steel walls. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature, a profound sense of dread settling over him as the heavy metal door closed behind them, sealing him inside the place where his brother's story seemed to have come to a horrific end. The transition from the sweltering August heat outside to the refrigerated air of the slaughterhouse was startling. Liam's breath fogged in front of him. The interior was vast and industrial, a stark contrast to the chaotic warmth of the racetrack he associated with Ryan. The walls were lined with reflective stainless steel panels, the floor made of pale industrial tile that appeared damp under the harsh overhead lighting. It was a clinical, unwelcoming space, designed for efficiency and sanitation, devoid of any human comfort. Empty meat hooks hung suspended from a rail system on the ceiling, swaying slightly in the circulated air. The silence was unsettling, broken only by the hum of the refrigeration units and the echo of their footsteps. Liam felt a primal sense of wrongness, an instinctive aversion to the environment. Callahan led him through the main processing area, past empty shelving units and workspaces scrubbed clean. The overwhelming smell of bleach burned Liam's nostrils. "The health department shut them down last week," Callahan explained, his voice low. "Severe violations. Rats, contamination, the works. They ordered a mandatory clearing and deep sanitation before the building could be repurposed." They turned a corner into a smaller, colder room. This area seemed older, the walls tiled rather than paneled. In the background, a worker in a full white protective suit, hairnet, and shoe coverings was making notes on a clipboard, seemingly detached from the gravity of the situation. "It was during the sanitation process that they found it," Callahan continued, stopping in front of what looked like a large ventilation grate set into the tiled wall. Liam looked at the grate. It seemed unremarkable, identical to several others lining the walls. But this one was different. It had been removed, leaning against the wall beside a dark, rectangular opening. "The workers were supposed to clean the ventilation system," Callahan said, pointing to the opening. When they removed the cover, they realized this wasn't a vent. It was a facade. He shone his flashlight into the opening. It revealed a small, insulated chamber, maybe 4 feet by 6 feet, concealed behind the wall. It was a hidden room expertly disguised. The cover was magnetized, designed to blend seamlessly with the tiling, Callahan explained. Routine inspections never looked closely. Why would they? It looked exactly like part of the ventilation system, only the deep clean, the mandatory removal of every panel, revealed it. This explained the silence, the 3 years of nothing. Ryan hadn't disappeared into the city. He had been erased, hidden within the walls of this grim facility. The meticulousness of the concealment spoke of professionalism, of a calculated effort to ensure he was never found. "What was inside?" Liam asked, his voice trembling, dreading the answer. Callahan's expression tightened. "A body bag containing human remains, and the helmet." The words hung in the cold air. Remains. The ambiguity was gone. The faint, irrational hope that Liam had nurtured in the darkest corners of his heart finally extinguished. The scene shifted to the medical examiner's office in Manhattan. The environment was even more sterile, the silence heavier. Liam felt detached from his own body, moving through the hallways as if in a dream. He was led into a small, brightly lit viewing room. On a metal table, sealed in a clear evidence bag, was the helmet. It was black velvet, the same style Ryan always wore. Liam recognized the scuff marks, the slight tear in the lining. He didn't need to see the initials to know it was his brother's. "We found initials stitched inside," Callahan said gently. R.M. Liam reached out, his fingers tracing the outline of the helmet through the plastic. He closed his eyes, the image of Ryan strapping it on before a race flashing through his mind. The pride, the determination, the youthful exuberance. It felt impossible that this object, so synonymous with Ryan's life, was now evidence of his death. "I can confirm it's his," Liam said, his voice choked with emotion. Callahan nodded, his expression somber. "We were hoping you could." It helped solidify the identification. He paused, letting the moment settle. "Mr. Murphy, I need to tell you that the dental records came back this morning. They positively identified the remains found in the chamber as Ryan Murphy." The confirmation was a formality, but it landed with the weight of finality. The past 3 years solidified into a cold, hard reality. Ryan wasn't missing. He was murdered, and hidden in a place designed for butchery. Liam looked away from the helmet, his eyes burning. The grief was overwhelming, a tidal wave of pain and loss that threatened to drown him. But beneath the grief, something else was stirring, a cold, focused rage. Someone had done this to his brother. Someone had taken his life, stolen his future, and hidden him away like garbage. He turned back to Callahan, his expression hardening. "Who did this?" "We don't know yet," Callahan admitted, "but we're reopening the investigation." "This changes everything." "It doesn't change the fact that he's gone," Liam said, his voice raw, "but it means someone is responsible. And I'm going to find out who." The journey back to his apartment was a blur. Liam felt a profound sense of isolation, the city outside the window seeming distant and unreal. The silence in the car was heavy, charged with the unspoken horrors of the day. When Callahan dropped him off, he offered condolences, but the words felt hollow. Liam climbed the stairs to his small apartment, the familiar surroundings now feeling alien. He walked into the living room, his eyes immediately drawn to the photograph on the mantelpiece. It was a picture of Ryan taken shortly after a major win. He was standing beside his horse, a magnificent chestnut with a wide white blaze down its face. Ryan was smiling, his blue eyes bright with triumph, 2 large gold medals suspended from an orange and blue ribbon around his neck. The horse, too, wore a prize ribbon, a rosette of purple, blue, and yellow attached to its bridle. The image was a stark reminder of everything that had been lost. The joy, the success, the future. Liam picked up the photograph, his fingers tracing the contours of his brother's face. The weight of the past 3 years pressed down on him, but the discovery at the slaughterhouse had shifted something fundamental. The agonizing uncertainty was gone, replaced by a terrifying clarity and a burning need for justice. The confirmation of Ryan's death didn't bring closure. It ignited a fire. The numbness that had characterized Liam's existence for the past 3 years evaporated, replaced by a relentless, driving need for answers. Grief was still there, a constant ache beneath the surface, but it was overshadowed by a focused rage that demanded action. The next morning, Liam didn't go to the construction site. He went to the precinct. He found Detective Callahan hunched over his desk, surrounded by stacks of files, the stale smell of coffee hanging in the air. Callahan looked up, surprised to see him. "Mr. Murphy, I was going to call you later today. We're starting to pull the old case files." "I want in," Liam said, his voice flat, determined. Callahan sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Mr. Murphy, I understand how you feel, but this is an active homicide investigation. We can't have civilians interfering." "I'm not just a civilian. I'm his brother." Liam pulled out a chair and sat down, uninvited. "And I know the racing world. You don't." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "You spent 6 months investigating 3 years ago and found nothing. The track is an island. People there don't talk to outsiders, especially not cops. They talk to me." Callahan studied him, recognizing the raw determination in his eyes. The detective was a pragmatist. He knew the insular nature of the horse racing community was a significant obstacle. Liam offered a potential advantage, an in that the police didn't have. "I can't deputize you, Murphy," Callahan said carefully, "but I can keep you informed. And I might ask you to facilitate some introductions, unofficially." He paused, emphasizing the next words. "But if you cross the line, if you compromise this investigation, I will shut you out. Understood?" It was a tense alliance, born of necessity and shared purpose. Liam nodded. "Understood." "All right," Callahan said, pulling a file toward him. "Let's start with the basics. The slaughterhouse, A&R Meat Packing. We're looking into the ownership, the employees, any connection to the track. It's a maze of shell corporations, but we're digging." Liam listened, but his mind was already racing ahead. The slaughterhouse was the end point. He needed to go back to the beginning. He returned to his apartment, the space feeling smaller, more suffocating than before. He went to the closet and pulled out a box filled with Ryan's belongings. He hadn't been able to look at them for years, but now he sifted through the contents with a desperate urgency. Riding boots, silks, programs from past races, and the photographs. He focused on the image of Ryan and his horse, the one that captured the essence of his brother's spirit. The vibrant colors, the genuine smile. He needed to understand what had happened to extinguish that light. He focused on Ryan's last day, June 2001. It was the day of the Belmont Stakes, one of the biggest races of the year. Ryan wasn't riding in the main event, but he had won a major undercard race, a huge upset victory that had set the track buzzing. Liam remembered the exhilaration, the pride, and the strange tension that seemed to follow. He replayed the events of that day in his mind, the celebration in the winner's circle, the interviews, and then the silence. Ryan had gone back to the jockey's locker room and never came out. Liam remembered the whispers at the track in the days that followed, the rumors, the speculation, and the sudden silence whenever he asked questions. People had been evasive, their eyes darting away, their answers vague. He had attributed it to the shock, the tragedy. But now he saw it differently. It wasn't shock, it was fear. He thought about the race itself. Ryan wasn't favored to win. His victory had been a surprise, a testament to his skill and determination. But upsets didn't usually lead to murder, unless the outcome mattered more to someone than just the purse. He needed to talk to the people who were there that day, the ones who knew Ryan best, the ones who might have seen something, heard something. He knew exactly where he had to go. Back to the place where it all began. Back to Belmont Park. The decision brought a strange sense of calm. For the first time in 3 years, Liam had a clear objective, a tangible path forward. The investigation into the slaughterhouse would proceed, but the answers, Liam knew, were hidden within the closed world of horse racing, and he was determined to uncover them, no matter the cost. He picked up his jacket, the weight of the past settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. He was stepping back into a world he had abandoned, a world filled with memories and ghosts. But this time, he wasn't looking for comfort. He was looking for the truth, and he wouldn't stop until he found it. The familiar sights and sounds of Belmont Park hit Liam with a wave of nostalgia that quickly soured into something darker. The sprawling grandstand, the manicured track, the smell of hay and horses. It was a world he had once loved, a world that had embraced his brother. But now everything felt sinister, the bright sunshine casting long, menacing shadows. He walked through the back stretch, the area behind the track where the stables, training facilities, and living quarters were located. It was a bustling community, a self-contained ecosystem with its own rules and hierarchies. Grooms, exercise riders, trainers, and veterinarians went about their daily routines, the rhythm of the track seemingly unchanged. But the news of the discovery at the slaughterhouse had spread. Liam could feel the whispers, the furtive glances, the sudden silences as he approached. The atmosphere was thick with tension, a palpable sense of fear permeating the air. He started with the people he knew, the ones who had worked with Ryan. He found old acquaintances, asked seemingly casual questions, probing for any information, any anomaly they might remember from that day. But he was met with a wall of silence. He found Jimmy, a groom who had worked in the same barn as Ryan. Jimmy was hosing down a horse, his movements methodical. When Liam approached, Jimmy stiffened, his eyes avoiding contact. "Jimmy, it's good to see you," Liam said, trying to keep his voice casual. "Liam, heard the news?" "Terrible thing," Jimmy mumbled, focusing intently on the horse. "Yeah, I'm trying to piece together what happened. You were here that day, right? The day he won the big race?" Jimmy hesitated, his grip tightening on the hose. "I was here." "Busy day. Don't remember much." "Anything unusual? Anything that stood out?" "No, nothing." The answer was too quick, too definitive. Jimmy turned away, signaling the conversation was over. "Gotta finish this." The pattern repeated itself throughout the day. Evasive answers, averted gazes, polite but firm refusals to engage. It was clear that people knew something, but they were terrified to talk. The fear was a living thing, crawling beneath the surface of the track's polished facade. Liam realized he needed to focus on the last person to see Ryan alive, his trainer, Mickey Doyle. Mickey had been like a second father to Ryan, nurturing his talent, guiding his career. He had been devastated by Ryan's disappearance. If anyone knew what happened that day, it was Mickey. He went to the barn where Mickey used to train. A new trainer had taken over, the stalls filled with unfamiliar horses. Liam asked the new trainer where he could find Mickey. "Mickey Doyle?" "He's not here anymore," the trainer said, shaking his head. "Hasn't been for a couple of years." "Do you know where he went?" The trainer hesitated. "Heard he fell on hard times after the kid disappeared. Took it hard, started drinking heavily, lost his license." The news hit Liam hard. Mickey had been a fixture at Belmont, a respected trainer with a reputation for integrity. To hear he had fallen so far was shocking. Liam spent the rest of the afternoon tracking down leads, asking around the track's underbelly, the bars, the diners, the places where the rumors circulated. He finally found an old groom who remembered Mickey. "Mickey?" "Yeah, I see him sometimes," the groom said, nursing a beer at a dimly lit bar near the track. "He's working upstate at one of the smaller tracks, Saratoga, I think, mucking stalls last I heard." Saratoga. It was a long way from the prestige of Belmont Park. The realization of Mickey's decline solidified Liam's determination. Mickey wasn't just grieving, he was hiding. Liam left the track as the sun began to set. The grandstand bathed in the golden light of the late afternoon. He felt frustrated, exhausted but also galvanized. The wall of silence was formidable but not impenetrable. He had a lead, a direction, and he knew that Mickey Doyle was the key. He had to find him, confront him, and break through the fear that held him captive. The answers were there, buried beneath 3 years of silence. And Liam was determined to unearth them. While Liam was navigating the hostile silence of Belmont Park, Detective Jack Callahan was fighting a different kind of battle in the fluorescent glare of the precinct. The investigation into A&R Meatpacking was proving to be a labyrinth of dead ends and obfuscation. The ownership of the slaughterhouse was buried under layers of shell corporations, a complex web designed to conceal the true beneficiaries. Callahan and his team spent days submerged in financial records, tracing the paper trail from one holding company to another. It was tedious, painstaking work, requiring forensic accounting expertise and a relentless attention to detail. The structure was sophisticated, suggesting a high level of financial acumen and a deliberate effort to evade scrutiny. "This isn't just some small-time operation," Callahan said to his partner, Detective Miller, pointing to a complex organizational chart they had constructed on the whiteboard. "This is organized crime." After days of digging, the structure eventually traced back to a holding company known as a front for one of the city's most powerful organized crime families. And a name began to surface, whispered in the corridors of power and feared in the city's underbelly. Anthony Russo. Russo, known on the streets as the Butcher, was a formidable figure. He ran a massive illegal gambling operation, controlling a network of bookies, loan sharks, and enforcers that extended throughout the 5 boroughs and beyond. He was known for his ruthlessness, his intelligence, and his ability to insulate himself from prosecution. He used a portfolio of legitimate businesses, including meat distribution, waste management, and construction, to launder the proceeds of his criminal enterprise. A&R Meatpacking was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. The connection between Russo and the slaughterhouse was organizational, not concrete enough for a warrant. There was no direct evidence linking him to Ryan Murphy's murder, but it confirmed Callahan's suspicion. This was a professional hit. "Russo is smart," Callahan said, studying the photograph of the man they had pulled from the organized crime database. Russo was impeccably dressed, his expression cold and calculating. "He doesn't get his hands dirty. He has layers of insulation, but the slaughterhouse is his, which means the murder happened on his watch." The implications were staggering. They were dealing with a sophisticated and dangerous organization, one with the resources and the ruthlessness to make a high-profile jockey disappear without a trace. The concealment of the body, the expertly disguised chamber, it all pointed to a level of professionalism that Callahan recognized. He knew that getting to Russo would be a long, arduous process. They needed leverage, a weak link in the chain of command. They needed evidence that could pierce the corporate veil and connect Russo directly to the crime. Callahan shifted his focus to Russo's organization, identifying the key players, the enforcers, the lieutenants. One name stood out: Vinnie Gallo. Gallo was Russo's primary enforcer, a brutal man known for his loyalty and his penchant for violence. If Russo ordered the hit, Gallo likely carried it out. Callahan ordered surveillance on Gallo, hoping to catch him making a mistake, revealing a connection to the slaughterhouse or the track. But Gallo was cautious, professional. He moved through the city like a ghost, adhering to a strict routine, avoiding any overt displays of criminality. The investigation stalled, hitting the formidable wall of organized crime. Callahan felt the familiar frustration creeping in. He knew the truth was there, hidden within the shadows of Russo's empire. But shining a light on it would require more than just police work. It would require a break, a mistake, a moment of weakness. He thought about Liam Murphy, the grieving brother driven by a relentless need for justice. Liam was operating outside the constraints of the law, fueled by emotion and an intimate knowledge of the racing world. Callahan realized that Liam might be the wild card they needed, the one who could disrupt the careful equilibrium of Russo's world. He picked up the phone, dialing Liam's number. He needed to know what Liam had found at the track, and he needed to warn him about the dangerous waters he was wading into. The connection to Russo changed the game. They were no longer just investigating a murder, they were taking on a syndicate, and the stakes had just gotten exponentially higher. The drive upstate to Saratoga was long, the highway stretching out before Liam like a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the dense greenery of the Hudson Valley. The scenery was beautiful, a stark contrast to the gritty urban landscape of the city, but Liam barely noticed. His mind was focused on Mickey Doyle, the man who held the key to his brother's past. He found the small track near Saratoga where Mickey was rumored to be working. It was a far cry from the grandeur of Belmont Park. The grandstand was smaller, the facilities older, the atmosphere more relaxed. It was a place for second-tier horses and trainers struggling to hold on to their careers. Liam parked his car and walked toward the stables. He asked around, describing Mickey, and was directed to the far end of the backstretch. He found Mickey mucking out a stall, his back bent, his movements slow and laborious. Mickey looked haggard, broken. He was thinner than Liam remembered, his face lined with grief and the ravages of heavy drinking. The vibrant, energetic trainer who had guided Ryan's career was gone, replaced by a shell of a man haunted by the past. Liam approached the stall, the smell of manure and hay filling the air. "Mickey?" Mickey stiffened, his grip tightening on the pitchfork. He turned slowly, his eyes widening in recognition and fear. He looked like he had seen a ghost. "Liam." His voice was raspy, barely a whisper. He took a step back, his eyes darting around as if looking for an escape route. "I need to talk to you, Mickey," Liam said, keeping his voice calm, steady. "I got nothing to say," Mickey mumbled, turning back to his work. "I told the police everything I know." "That was 3 years ago. Things have changed. They found him, Mickey." Mickey froze. He knew. The news had reached even this far. He closed his eyes, his body trembling. "I know you saw something that day," Liam pressed, stepping closer. "The police report said you told them he seemed nervous?" Terrified. Why, Mickey? What was he afraid of? Mickey became agitated, shaking his head vehemently. "He just left. I don't know why. He was a kid. Kids are unpredictable." He wasn't unpredictable. He was disciplined, focused. He had just won the biggest race of his career. He wouldn't just walk away. "You don't know what you're talking about," Mickey said, his voice rising in panic. He dropped the pitchfork and tried to push past Liam, desperate to escape. Liam grabbed his arm, stopping him. "I know you're scared, Mickey. I know they got to you, but they can't protect you now. Not anymore." Mickey looked at him, his eyes filled with a desperate, paralyzing fear. "You don't know what you're messing with, Liam. These people, they don't play by the rules. They make people disappear. Permanently. They already did that to Ryan. I'm not going to let them do it to the truth. Leave it alone, Liam. For your own good. Some things are better left buried." Mickey pulled his arm free and stumbled away, leaving Liam standing alone in the stall. Liam watched him go, his heart heavy with a mixture of pity and frustration. He had underestimated the depth of Mickey's fear. It wasn't just a vague anxiety. It was a specific, paralyzing terror of someone, something. He realized he couldn't break Mickey with confrontation alone. He needed leverage, a way to make Mickey more afraid of staying silent than of talking. He left the track, the sun beginning to set, casting long shadows across the backstretch. He felt a growing sense of urgency. The wall of silence was thicker, more impenetrable than he had imagined. But he also knew that Mickey was the weak point, the crack in the facade. And he would find a way to break through it, no matter what it took. The truth was there, trapped within the terrified silence of the broken trainer. And Liam was determined to set it free. Mickey Doyle finished his work at the track, his hands shaking so badly he could barely grip the steering wheel. Liam's visit had shattered the fragile peace he had constructed around himself, the self-imposed exile in Saratoga, no longer feeling safe. The past 3 years had been a delicate balancing act, a constant effort to maintain the silence that kept him alive. But now the silence was precarious, the balance shifting beneath his feet. He drove to his usual diner, a small, brightly lit establishment on the outskirts of town. He needed a drink, something to steady his nerves, to push back the memories that Liam's questions had resurrected. He ordered a coffee and a shot of whiskey, his eyes scanning the room nervously. The diner was quiet, only a few patrons scattered among the booths. But then he saw him. Sitting at the counter, nursing a cup of coffee, was a man Mickey recognized instantly. Vinnie Gallo, Russo's primary enforcer. The sight of Gallo sent a jolt of terror through Mickey. Gallo was a presence, a physical manifestation of the threat that had hung over him for 3 years. He was a large man, impeccably dressed, his expression cold and impassive. Gallo made eye contact with Mickey, a flicker of recognition in his dark eyes. He didn't say anything, didn't make any overt gesture. He just watched him, a silent predator assessing its prey. The message was clear. They knew. They knew the body had been found. They knew Liam was asking questions. And they were watching. Mickey's stomach churned. He threw a few dollars on the table, leaving his coffee and whiskey untouched, and hurried out of the diner, the bell above the door chiming merrily, incongruously. He walked quickly to his car, the night air feeling cold against his skin. He fumbled with his keys, his hands trembling uncontrollably. He just wanted to get away, to disappear into the anonymity of the night. But as he reached his car, he saw it. Tucked under his windshield wiper, a single item that stopped him cold. A betting slip. He reached out, his fingers brushing against the thin paper. He pulled it out, his eyes struggling to focus in the dim light of the parking lot. It was a betting slip from the June 2001 race, the race Ryan had won. The implication was unmistakable. It was a reminder of the debt that was owed, the silence that was mandatory for survival. It was a threat, subtle but terrifying, a promise of what would happen if he talked. Mickey crumbled, leaning against the car, the betting slip clutched in his hand. The fear was overwhelming, a physical weight pressing down on him, suffocating him. He was trapped, caught between the relentless pressure of Liam's search for justice and the terrifying reality of Russo's reach. He realized that his silence was no longer enough. The discovery of the body had changed everything. The investigation was active, the pressure mounting, and Russo was cleaning house, eliminating any loose ends. And Mickey was the loosest end of all. He looked at the betting slip again, the numbers blurring through his tears. He had thought he could escape the past, that he could hide from the consequences of his silence. But the past was here, staring him in the face, demanding a reckoning. And he knew, with a terrifying certainty, that he couldn't run anymore. The choice was no longer between silence and speaking. It was between speaking and dying. Liam returned to the city, the frustration of his encounter with Mickey gnawing at him. He met with Callahan the next day, relaying the details of the confrontation. "He's terrified," Liam said, pacing the floor of Callahan's office. "He knows something, but he's too scared to talk." Callahan nodded, his expression grim. He shared his findings about Russo and Vinnie Gallo. "He has good reason to be scared. Russo is the real deal, and Gallo is his hammer." The name Russo meant nothing to Liam, but the implication was clear. They were dealing with organized crime. "If Russo is involved, then the race was fixed," Liam said, the realization hitting him with sudden clarity. Ryan's win wasn't just an upset, it was a defiance. "That's what I'm thinking," Callahan agreed. "But proving it is another matter. The official betting records show nothing unusual. If there was a fix, it was off the books." "Then we need to go off the books," Liam said. He knew the track's underbelly, the network of illegal bookies and gamblers that operated in the shadows of the legitimate racing world. He sought out an old acquaintance, Benny, a low-level bookie who operated out of a smoky OTB parlor near the track. Benny was a small, wiry man with a nervous energy and a photographic memory for odds and payouts. Liam found him hunched over a racing form, a cigarette dangling from his lips. He sat down next to him, sliding a $50 bill across the table. "Benny, I need some information." Benny looked at the money, then at Liam, his eyes narrowing suspiciously. "What kind of information?" June 2001, the Belmont Stakes undercard, Ryan Murphy's race. Benny stiffened. "That was a long time ago." "I know, but I need to know about the betting action that day, the off-the-books action." Benny hesitated, his eyes darting around the room. "That's dangerous territory, Liam." "People don't like digging up old bones." "I'm not digging up bones. I'm looking for the truth." Liam pushed the money closer. "I know you keep records. I know you remember." Benny sighed, the temptation of the money outweighing his caution. He pulled out a small, battered notebook from his pocket, the pages filled with cryptic notations. He flipped through the pages, his finger tracing the lines of numbers. "It was a strange day," he admitted, his voice low. "The money was all over the place." He analyzed the archived betting data, translating the notations into recognizable patterns. He found a massive anomaly. "The early money was on Ryan," Benny said, pointing to a series of entries. "He was a long shot, but he had a following." But then, late in the betting window, everything shifted. Huge amounts of money had been placed on Ryan's opponent, drastically shifting the odds. It was a coordinated effort, a massive influx of cash that dwarfed the legitimate betting pool. "Someone expected Ryan to lose," Benny said, his voice hushed. "Someone bet big on the favorite. And when Ryan won—" He trailed off, the implication clear. They lost a fortune, millions of dollars. The realization hit Liam like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about the race, it was about the money. The massive financial loss provided a powerful motive for murder. Ryan hadn't just won a race, he had cost someone a fortune. And in the world of organized crime, such defiance was unacceptable. Liam thanked Benny, leaving the OTB parlor with a newfound sense of clarity. The puzzle was starting to come together. The fixed race, the terrified trainer, the connection to organized crime. It all pointed to a conspiracy, a calculated effort to control the outcome of the race, and a brutal act of retribution when the plan failed. He knew he was getting closer to the truth, but he also knew that the closer he got, the more dangerous the game became. He was no longer just investigating a murder, he was exposing a conspiracy, and the people involved would do anything to keep their secrets buried. Armed with the knowledge of the fixed race, Liam returned to Belmont Park, his questions becoming more pointed, his focus narrowing on the track's underbelly. He started probing the connections between the racing world and the illegal gambling operations that thrived in its shadows. He talked to the bookies, the loan sharks, the hangers-on who knew the secrets that were never whispered in the polished confines of the clubhouse. The atmosphere became openly hostile. The polite evasiveness of his earlier visits hardened into suspicion and resentment. He was no longer seen as a grieving brother seeking closure. He was a threat, a disruption to the delicate ecosystem of the track. He felt the eyes watching him, the whispers trailing behind him. He received anonymous phone calls, the line silent when he answered. He noticed cars following him, lingering outside his apartment building. The pressure was mounting, the invisible hand of the syndicate tightening its grip. One evening, after a long day of fruitless searching, Liam returned to his apartment. The exhaustion was bone deep, the frustration a bitter taste in his mouth. He climbed the stairs, the familiar sounds of the city filtering through the hallway. But as he reached his front door, he noticed something was wrong. The door was slightly ajar, the lock hanging loose in the frame. A jolt of adrenaline shot through him. He pushed the door open slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room, expecting to find a scene of destruction. But the apartment was mostly undisturbed. The furniture was in place, the belongings seemingly untouched. It wasn't a robbery. It was something else. He walked into the living room, his gaze drawn to the coffee table. His research on the race, the betting records, the notes from his conversations, the organizational chart Callahan had shared was spread out on the table. It had been neatly arranged, organized in a way that suggested careful scrutiny. And placed on top of the papers, gleaming under the lamplight, was a single, sharp butcher's hook. The sight of it sent a wave of nausea through him. It was a visceral, terrifying message, a direct link to the slaughterhouse where Ryan's body had been found. It was a promise of violence, a warning of what would happen if he continued digging. Liam stood frozen, the silence of the apartment pressing in on him. He realized the depth of the threat he was facing. These people were not just criminals, they were monsters. They operated with impunity, their reach extending into every corner of the city, even into the sanctity of his home. He was being watched closely. They knew his movements, his research, his weaknesses. They were playing a game of psychological warfare, tightening the screws, hoping to break his resolve. But the sight of the butcher's hook didn't break him. It galvanized him. The fear was still there, a cold knot in his stomach, but it was overshadowed by a renewed sense of purpose. They had made a mistake. They had shown their hand, and in doing so, they had confirmed that he was on the right track. He picked up the butcher's hook, the cold metal feeling heavy in his hand. He wouldn't be intimidated. He wouldn't back down. He would continue to dig, to expose the truth, to seek justice for his brother. The warning had failed. The fight had just begun. Liam reported the break-in to Callahan. The detective arrived quickly, his expression grim as he surveyed the scene. He recognized the butcher's hook for what it was, a signature, a calling card. "Russo is sending a message," Callahan said, his voice tight with anger. "He knows you're getting close." He urged caution, suggesting Liam move to a safe house, put the investigation on hold. But Liam refused. "I'm not running," he said, his voice resolute. "I'm finishing this." He realized that Mickey Doyle was the only one who could confirm the fix, the only one who could connect Russo directly to the race. He needed to break the trainer, to shatter the fear that held him captive. He drove back to Saratoga the next day, the butcher's hook sitting on the passenger seat, a stark reminder of the stakes. He found Mickey at a dive bar near the track, hunched over the bar, a glass of whiskey clutched in his hand. The bar was dark, smoky, the air heavy with the smell of stale beer and desperation. Liam sat down next to him, placing the butcher's hook on the bar between them. Mickey looked at it, his eyes widening in terror, his face draining of color. "They came to my apartment," Liam said, his voice low, intense. "They left this." Mickey stared at the hook, his body trembling. He knew what it meant. "I know about the fixed race, Mickey," Liam continued, pressing his advantage. "I know about the money, and I know about Russo." The name hung in the air, a physical weight pressing down on them. Mickey looked away, his eyes filled with despair. "You don't understand," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "They'll kill me." "They'll kill you anyway," Liam said, his voice hardening. "Russo is cleaning house. He knows the investigation is active. He's eliminating any loose ends. And you, Mickey, are the loosest end of all." He leaned closer, his gaze intense. "Your silence won't protect you. It will condemn you. The only way out is to talk, to tell the truth." Mickey began to crack. The years of guilt, the constant fear, the realization of his own mortality, it all came crashing down on him. Tears streamed down his face, carving paths through the grime and stubble. "He was a good kid," Mickey whispered, his voice breaking. "He had integrity. He wouldn't do it." "Wouldn't do what?" Liam asked, his heart pounding in his chest. Mickey took a shuddering breath, the words tumbling out in a torrent of confession. "They approached him before the race. Vinnie Gallo, Russo's enforcer, he told Ryan to throw the race, to hold back, to let the favorite win. The confirmation hit Liam like a physical blow. The rumors, the speculation, the anomaly in the betting, it was all true. They offered him money, Mickey continued, his voice trembling. More money than he had ever seen. But he refused. He said he couldn't do it. He said it wasn't right. Ryan's integrity, his unwavering moral compass, had sealed his fate. He had defied the syndicate, cost them a fortune, and paid the ultimate price. "What happened after the race?" Liam asked, his voice tight with anticipation. Mickey closed his eyes, the memory agonizing. He was terrified? He knew what he had done. He knew they wouldn't let it go. He looked at Liam, his eyes pleading for understanding. "I tried to warn him. I told him to run, to disappear, but it was too late. They were already there." The confession hung in the air, the silence of the bar broken only by the muffled sounds of the jukebox and the clinking of glasses. The truth was out, raw and devastating, and it was more horrific than Liam had ever imagined. Mickey's confession continued, his voice barely a whisper, the words heavy with the weight of 3 years of silence. He described the scene in the jockey's locker room after the race. The exhilaration of the win had quickly faded, replaced by a paralyzing fear. "He was shaking," Mickey said, his eyes distant, lost in the memory. He couldn't even take off his silks. He just stood there, his face pale, his eyes darting toward the door. He told Mickey, "I shouldn't have won. They won't let this go." Liam listened, his heart aching for his brother, for the terror he must have felt in those final moments. "I told him to stay there, to wait for security," Mickey continued, his voice trembling. "I was going to get help. But he wouldn't listen. He said he had to get away, to disappear before they found him. He left the locker room, his movements furtive, desperate. Mickey followed him, a sense of dread settling over him. He watched from the shadows as Ryan made his way toward the parking lot. And then Mickey confessed the detail he had omitted for 3 years, the secret that had haunted his every waking moment. "They were waiting for him," Mickey whispered, tears streaming down his face. A dark sedan, parked near the exit, Vinnie Gallo and another man. They intercepted him before he reached his car. The image was vivid, agonizing. Ryan struggling, fighting against the inevitable. The enforcers overpowering him, forcing him into the sedan. The car speeding away, disappearing into the night. Mickey had witnessed the abduction. He had seen the faces of the men who had taken his brother, and he had remained silent, paralyzed by fear. The confession was devastating, a confirmation of Liam's worst fears. The realization that Mickey had known the truth all along, that he had carried this burden alone, was a bitter pill to swallow. But the anger Liam felt toward Mickey was overshadowed by a burning need for justice. "You have to tell the police," Liam said, his voice urgent. "You have to identify them." Mickey hesitated, the fear still lingering in his eyes. But the confession had broken the spell. The silence was no longer an option. "Okay," he whispered, his voice resolute. "I'll do it." Liam immediately brought Mickey to Callahan. The detective listened intently as Mickey recounted the events of that day, his voice trembling but unwavering. He described the confrontation before the race, the terror in Ryan's eyes, the abduction in the parking lot. He identified Vinnie Gallo as the man who had orchestrated the abduction. The testimony was a game-changer. It provided the missing link, the direct connection between the fixed race and Ryan's disappearance. It gave them a motive, a suspect, and an eyewitness. Callahan moved quickly, recognizing the urgency of the situation. Mickey was placed in protective custody, hidden away in a safe house until the trial. Warrants were issued for Vinnie Gallo's arrest. The investigation surged forward, the momentum shifting in their favor. The truth was finally coming to light, the shadows receding. Liam felt a glimmer of hope, the first real sense of progress in 3 years. But he also knew that the fight was far from over. They had identified the enforcer, but the mastermind remained untouched. Russo was still out there, insulated by layers of protection, his power undiminished. The arrest of Vinnie Gallo would be a blow to the syndicate, but it wouldn't be fatal. Russo would retaliate, lash out with all the resources at his disposal. The danger was increasing, the stakes rising. Liam realized that getting to Russo would require more than just eyewitness testimony. It would require irrefutable proof, evidence that could pierce the corporate veil and expose the rot at the heart of his empire. The fight for justice had entered a new phase, and it was about to get a lot more dangerous. With Mickey Doyle's detailed official statement secured and the trainer safely in protective custody, Detective Callahan felt a surge of optimism. They had the motive, the fixed race, the massive financial loss, and an eyewitness to the abduction. It was a strong case, compelling and coherent. He presented the evidence to the assistant district attorney, confident that they had enough to move forward with the prosecution of Vinnie Gallo and eventually Anthony Russo. The meeting with the ADA, a politically ambitious man named Robert Vance, was held in a spacious office overlooking the city skyline. Callahan laid out the case, emphasizing the strength of Mickey's testimony and the corroborating evidence of the betting anomaly. But the ADA was hesitant. He listened patiently, his expression impassive, but his response was lukewarm. "It's a compelling story, Detective," Vance said, leaning back in his leather chair. "But it's just that, a story. The foundation of your case rests on the testimony of a terrified, alcoholic witness with a history of instability." "He's credible," Callahan argued, his voice tight with frustration. "He witnessed the abduction. He identified Gallo." "Under duress," Vance countered. "Russo's lawyers will tear him apart on the stand. They'll paint him as an unreliable witness, motivated by guilt and fear." He stood up, walking toward the window, his gaze fixed on the city below. "And we still have no physical evidence linking Russo or Gallo to the murder itself. We have the organizational link to the slaughterhouse, but that's not enough to convict." Callahan knew what this was really about. Russo was a powerful man, his influence extending into the corridors of power, his connections reaching deep into the political establishment. A high-profile loss against Russo's lawyers would be a career-ending move for an ambitious ADA. "We need more," Vance said, turning back to Callahan. "We need something concrete, something irrefutable. Until then, I can't authorize the warrants." The refusal was a blow, a stark reminder of the limitations of the justice system when confronted with organized crime. Callahan suspected Russo's political influence was at play, the invisible hand of the syndicate manipulating the levers of power. He left the ADA's office, the frustration churning in his gut. He knew that getting justice for Ryan Murphy would require more than just good police work. It would require navigating the treacherous waters of political maneuvering and institutional corruption. He organized surveillance on Gallo, hoping to catch him making a mistake, revealing a connection to the murder weapon, the location of the missing evidence. But Gallo was cautious, professional. He moved through the city with an air of impunity, seemingly unconcerned about the investigation. The investigation stalled, hitting the wall of influence that protected Russo and his organization. The momentum they had gained with Mickey's confession evaporated, replaced by a growing sense of impotence. Callahan realized they needed a new strategy, a different approach. They needed to find the evidence that the ADA demanded, the smoking gun that could break through the wall of silence and expose the truth. He thought about Liam Murphy, the grieving brother operating outside the constraints of the system. Liam had proven to be resourceful, determined, and fearless. He might be the only one who could find the leverage they needed, the weak link in Russo's armor. The fight was far from over, but it had just become a lot more complicated. The setback with the ADA left Liam frustrated, angry, but undeterred. He realized that relying on the official channels of justice was not enough. He had to take matters into his own hands to operate in the shadows where Russo's influence couldn't reach. He knew they needed proof of the bets, the scale of the loss. The official records showed nothing. The bets were illegal, off the books. They needed someone who could testify to the financial motive, someone who could corroborate Mickey's story. He returned to Benny, the bookie who had helped him analyze the betting data. He pressed Benny for more information, for the names of the people who had placed the massive bets on Ryan's opponent. Benny was reluctant, the fear of retribution palpable, but Liam was persistent, emphasizing the danger they were all in as long as Russo was free. Benny finally revealed a crucial piece of information. The main bookie handling the action that day, Slick Sammy Gallo, no relation to Vinny, had disappeared shortly after Ryan vanished. Rumors were that Sammy had run afoul of Russo, that he had been blamed for the massive loss. Sammy was the one who took the bets, Benny said, his voice low. He knew the numbers, the players. If anyone can confirm the fix, it's him. Liam realized that finding Sammy was crucial. He was the missing piece of the puzzle, the witness who could provide the irrefutable proof they needed. He started tracking Sammy, utilizing his connections in the gambling world, the network of informants and acquaintances he had cultivated over the past few weeks. It was a difficult search, Sammy having vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of rumors and speculation. The search led him to Atlantic City, the glittering facade of the casinos masking the underlying desperation and decay. He learned that Sammy was living under an assumed name, working as a bartender in a dimly lit dive bar off the boardwalk. Liam found him late one night, the bar empty except for a few solitary drinkers nursing their sorrows. Sammy was older than Liam expected, his face lined with stress and the weight of his secrets. Liam sat down at the bar, ordering a beer. He waited until Sammy approached him, his expression guarded. "Sammy Gallo?" Liam asked, his voice low. Sammy stiffened, his eyes narrowing suspiciously. "Who's asking?" "My name is Liam Murphy, Ryan Murphy's brother." The name hung in the air, a ghost from the past. Sammy's face paled, his hand trembling as he wiped the bar. "I know what happened that day, Sammy," Liam continued, his gaze intense. "I know about the fixed race, the money. And I know about Russo. Sammy was hostile, defensive. I don't know what you're talking about." "You ran because you were scared," Liam pressed. "Scared that Russo would blame you for the loss. Scared that you would end up like Ryan?" He leaned closer, his voice urgent. "Russo is vulnerable now. The investigation is active. This is your chance to make things right, to get out from under his thumb." Sammy hesitated, the internal struggle playing out on his face. The fear of Russo was deeply ingrained, a primal instinct for survival, but the desire for freedom, for redemption, was also there, flickering beneath the surface. He finally cracked. He confirmed everything. Russo's syndicate had lost millions. The fix was in, the outcome predetermined. Ryan's victory had been a disaster. Sammy had fled, fearing for his life. He had been living in the shadows, haunted by the past, paralyzed by fear. "I have the records," he whispered, his voice trembling. "The ledger, the proof of the bets." The revelation was staggering, the smoking gun they had been searching for. Sammy agreed to provide a statement to Callahan, to testify against Russo if protection was guaranteed. Liam left Atlantic City with a renewed sense of hope. They had the motive, the eyewitness, and now the proof. The case against Russo was solidifying, the walls closing in. The end was in sight, but the most dangerous part of the journey was still ahead. Sammy Gallo's testimony, combined with the ledger detailing the illegal bets, provided the irrefutable proof of the financial motive. The scale of the loss was staggering, the connection to Russo undeniable. Callahan presented the new evidence to the ADA, confident that this time they had enough. But the ADA remained hesitant. The wall of influence surrounding Russo was proving to be more formidable than they had anticipated. "It's strong evidence," the ADA admitted, studying the ledger. "But it's still circumstantial. We have the motive, but we still don't have a concrete link between Russo and the murder location." The slaughterhouse? It remained the central mystery of the case. Why that specific location? Why hide the body in a facility owned by Russo's organization, creating a direct link to the crime? Liam focused on this question, the anomaly gnawing at him. He started digging into the business operations of A&R Meatpacking, looking for any connection to the track, any reason why Russo would choose that location. He remembered Ryan talking about the vendors at the track, the network of suppliers that provided everything from feed for the horses to food for the restaurants. It was a lucrative business, controlled by a handful of powerful players. He suggested Callahan look into the meat supply contracts for Belmont Park. It was a long shot, a hunch based on a vague memory, but they had nothing else to go on. Callahan started digging, pulling the financial records of the track, the contracts with the vendors. It was a tedious process, sifting through layers of bureaucracy and paperwork. But then he found it, a connection that changed everything. A&R Meatpacking had exclusive, lucrative contracts with Belmont Park for supplying the track's restaurants. The contracts were worth millions of dollars, a significant source of revenue for Russo's organization. The connection was organizational, but it provided a direct link between the slaughterhouse and the track. It explained why Russo had access to the facility, why he would choose that location to dispose of the body. But the discovery also raised new questions. The contracts had been awarded under suspicious circumstances, shortly before Ryan's disappearance. The bidding process had been opaque, the terms unusually favorable to A&R Meatpacking. It suggested corruption, a conspiracy that extended beyond the fixed race and the murder. It suggested that Russo had infiltrated the track, compromising the integrity of the sport at the highest levels. Callahan focused on the procurement process, identifying the officials responsible for awarding the contracts. The paper trail led to a name: David Chen, the former head of procurement at Belmont Park. Chen had retired shortly after the contracts were awarded, his departure sudden and unexplained. He had moved to Florida, seemingly disappearing from the racing world. The discovery of the corrupt official provided a new avenue of investigation, a potential weak link in Russo's armor. If they could prove the bribery, the corruption, they could strengthen the case against Russo, exposing the full extent of his criminal enterprise. The investigation was expanding, the scope widening beyond the murder of Ryan Murphy. They were no longer just investigating a crime. They were uncovering a systemic corruption that threatened the very foundation of the sport. The fight for justice had become a crusade, and the stakes had just gotten even higher. The identification of David Chen as the track official responsible for the suspicious contracts opened a new front in the investigation. He was the missing link, the connection between Russo and the track, the proof of the corruption that had facilitated the murder. Callahan focused on tracking down Chen, utilizing the resources of the NYPD to locate him in Florida. But the process was slow, hampered by bureaucracy and jurisdictional issues. They didn't have the immediate resources to pursue Chen, to put pressure on him, to force him to cooperate. Liam felt the urgency mounting. The investigation was stalling, the momentum shifting. He couldn't afford to wait for the official channels to grind into action. He had to act, to take the initiative, to confront Chen himself. He decided to go to Florida. It was a risky move, operating outside the constraints of the law, but he felt he had no choice. He needed answers, and he needed them now. He flew to Miami, the humid air hitting him like a physical blow as he stepped off the plane. The vibrant colors, the pulsating energy of the city, felt alien, surreal. He was a stranger in a strange land, driven by a relentless need for justice. He tracked down Chen to a luxury condo in a gated community overlooking the ocean. The wealth was staggering, a testament to the lucrative nature of the corruption that had fueled his retirement. Liam watched the condo, observing Chen's movements, his routine. Chen was paranoid, cautious. He rarely left the condo, his groceries delivered, his interactions limited to a few trusted associates. Liam realized that a direct confrontation would be difficult. He needed leverage, a way to break through Chen's defenses, to force him to talk. He decided to confront Chen in the parking garage, the isolated environment providing the perfect opportunity for a conversation. He waited until late one night, the garage empty, the silence broken only by the hum of the ventilation system. Chen emerged from the elevator, his movements hurried, his eyes darting around nervously. Liam stepped out of the shadows, blocking his path. "David Chen?" Chen stiffened, his face paling under the fluorescent lights. "Who are you?" "My name is Liam Murphy. I'm here about the A&R meatpacking contracts." The name hung in the air, a ghost from the past. Chen's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing suspiciously. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I know about the bribery, the corruption," Liam pressed, his voice low, intense. "I know you took the money. And I know about Russo." Chen was dismissive, waving his hand nonchalantly. "You're delusional. I have nothing to say to you." He tried to push past Liam, but Liam stood his ground. "They found the body, Chen." Ryan Murphy, the jockey, in the slaughterhouse. The revelation hit Chen like a punch to the gut. The color drained from his face, his bravado evaporating. "You're lying," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I'm not. The investigation is active, and it's leading straight to you." Chen hesitated, the fear flickering in his eyes. He realized the depth of the trouble he was in. The past was catching up to him, the consequences of his actions looming large. But the fear of Russo was still stronger. He shook his head, his resolve hardening. "Get out of my way," he snarled, pushing past Liam and hurrying toward his car. Liam watched him go, frustrated but not discouraged. He had seen the fear in Chen's eyes, the crack in his facade. He knew that Chen was vulnerable, that the pressure was mounting. He just needed to find the right leverage, the tipping point that would force him to cooperate. The confrontation had failed, but the game was far from over. Liam continued to observe Chen, the tension mounting with each passing day. He sensed that Chen was cracking under the pressure, the paranoia increasing, the fear becoming palpable. He just needed one more push, one final trigger to break him. The opportunity came a few days later. Liam was watching the condo from a distance when he saw a private courier arrive, delivering a package to Chen. Chen met the courier in the lobby, his movements hurried, his expression anxious. He opened the package, his hands trembling. Liam watched through the telephoto lens of his camera, his heart pounding in his chest. Chen's face went pale as he looked at the contents of the package. Liam zoomed in, his eyes struggling to focus. He saw it, a photograph of the A&R meatpacking facility, circled in red. It was a threat, a veiled message from Russo, a reminder of the consequences of betrayal. Liam realized this was the moment, the leverage he had been searching for. He intercepted Chen as he was leaving the condo, the photograph clutched in his hand. Chen was agitated, his eyes darting around nervously. "He knows," Liam said, his voice low. "Russo knows you're a liability." Chen looked at him, his eyes filled with terror. "What do you want?" "I want the truth," Liam said. "I want justice." He argued that Russo was cleaning house, eliminating any loose ends. Chen was a liability, a witness who could connect him to the corruption, the murder. "He won't protect you," Liam pressed. "He'll silence you." Just like he silenced Ryan. Chen cracked, the fear of Russo outweighing his loyalty, his greed. He confessed everything, the bribery, the corruption, the conspiracy. He admitted that Russo had paid him millions to secure the contracts, giving him control over the facility, the perfect location to dispose of the body. The confession was devastating, a confirmation of the systemic corruption that had facilitated the murder. But it wasn't enough. They needed proof, something concrete that could bring Russo down. And then Chen revealed the crucial information, the smoking gun they had been searching for. "Russo keeps a ledger," Chen whispered, his voice trembling. "A separate, physical ledger for his illegal operations. He's paranoid about digital trails. He writes everything down." The ledger detailed all the payoffs, the bribes, the specifics of the race fix. It was the proof they needed, the key to dismantling Russo's empire. "Where is it?" Liam asked, his voice urgent. "His private social club," Chen said, "in Queens. He keeps it in a safe in his office." The revelation was staggering. The location of the ledger, the key to justice. Liam relayed the information to Callahan. The detective recognized the significance of the discovery. This was the smoking gun, the evidence that could bring Russo down. But getting it would be a challenge. The social club was a fortress, heavily guarded, impenetrable. Any official move would tip Russo off, and the ledger would disappear. They needed a plan, a strategy to retrieve the ledger without alerting Russo, and they needed to move quickly. The window of opportunity was closing. The final act had begun. The existence of the ledger changed everything. It was the physical proof they needed, the undeniable link between Russo and the sprawling criminal enterprise that had led to Ryan's death. But the ledger was locked away in the heart of the enemy's stronghold. Callahan immediately tried to secure a warrant for the social club. He presented Chen's testimony, the detailed confession of the bribery and the corruption. But the ADA remained obstinate. "Chen is compromised," the ADA argued, his voice dismissive. "He's a corrupt official trying to save his own skin. His testimony is tainted. We can't base a warrant on the word of a criminal." The refusal was a blow, a stark reminder of the pervasive influence of Russo's organization. Callahan realized that the official channels were closed. The justice system was paralyzed, unable to penetrate the wall of silence and corruption that protected Russo. Liam felt the frustration mounting, the desperation churning in his gut. They were so close, the truth within reach. He couldn't let it slip away. He realized he had to get the ledger himself. It was a desperate gambit, a reckless move that could cost him his life. But he felt he had no choice. The system had failed. Justice was in his hands. He met with Callahan, outlining his plan. The detective was hesitant, the risks staggering. "You're crazy, Liam," Callahan said, his voice tight with concern. "The place is a fortress. You'll never get in." "I have to try," Liam said, his voice resolute. "For Ryan." Callahan saw the determination in his eyes, the unwavering commitment to justice. He knew he couldn't stop him. "Be careful," Callahan warned, his voice heavy with foreboding. "If you get caught, I can't help you." Liam started studying the layout of the social club, the surrounding area. It was a nondescript brick building in a quiet neighborhood in Queens, the entrance heavily guarded, the windows opaque. He spent days observing the club, noting the routines of the guards, the delivery schedules, the patterns of the patrons. He was looking for a weakness, a vulnerability, a way in. He noticed an adjacent building was vacant, under renovation. The scaffolding, the construction debris, the lack of security, it provided the opportunity he had been searching for. He formulated a plan. He would access the vacant building, climb the scaffolding to the roof, and enter the club from a shared access point. It was a risky plan, dependent on stealth, timing, and luck. But it was the only option. His experience in construction gave him an advantage. He knew how to navigate the scaffolding, how to move silently, how to blend into the environment. The night of the infiltration arrived. The air was cold, the sky overcast, the city lights reflecting off the low-hanging clouds. Liam stood in the shadows of the vacant building, his heart pounding in his chest. He was dressed in dark clothing, a backpack containing the tools he needed slung over his shoulder. He took a deep breath, the weight of the moment settling on him. This was it, the culmination of 3 years of searching, of fighting, of grieving, the chance to finally bring his brother's killer to justice. He moved toward the scaffolding, the darkness enveloping him like a shroud. The desperate gambit had begun. The vacant building was silent, the air thick with the smell of dust and decay. Liam moved through the darkness, his footsteps muffled by the debris littering the floor. He found the scaffolding at the rear of the building, a skeletal structure rising into the night sky. He started climbing, the metal bars cold against his hands. The physical exertion was demanding, his muscles burning with the effort. He moved slowly, deliberately, testing each foothold before shifting his weight. The city noise, the distant sirens, the rumble of the subway, masked the sounds of his movements. He reached the roof, the wind whipping around him, the city sprawling out below. He crouched low, his eyes scanning the adjacent rooftop of the social club. It was dark, deserted. The security was focused on the street level, the possibility of a rooftop infiltration seemingly overlooked. He moved quickly, crossing the narrow gap between the buildings. He was now on the roof of the social club, the enemy territory. He located the access hatch to the ventilation system. It was old, rusted, the metal corroded by years of exposure. It was poorly secured, a single padlock holding it closed. He pulled out a bolt cutter from his backpack, the heavy metal feeling reassuring in his hand. He snapped the padlock, the sound echoing in the silence of the night. He pried the hatch open, the hinges screeching in protest. A blast of warm air hit him, carrying the muffled sounds of the busy club below, the music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses. He lowered himself into the dark ductwork, the metal cold against his skin. The space was cramped, narrow, the darkness absolute. He started crawling, his movements slow, laborious. The dust choked him, the air thick and stagnant. He navigated the twists and turns of the ventilation system, guided by the schematic he had memorized. He was heading toward Rousseau's private office, located in the back of the club, away from the noise and the crowds. He could hear the voices below him, the conversations drifting up through the vents. He moved silently, carefully, the adrenaline surging through him. He was inside the fortress, the heart of the enemy's stronghold. The infiltration was successful, but the hardest part was still ahead. He reached the vent above the office, the light filtering through the grate, the sound of silence indicating the room was empty. He paused, listening intently, his senses heightened. He was close. The ledger, the truth, was within reach. He took a deep breath, steadying his nerves. The moment of truth had arrived. Liam carefully removed the grate, the screws turning easily in the old metal. He lowered it silently, placing it on the ductwork beside him. He peered through the opening, his eyes scanning the office below. It was empty. The room was luxurious, opulent, a testament to Rousseau's wealth and power. The walls were lined with dark wood paneling, the furniture plush and expensive. A large mahogany desk dominated the space, a crystal decanter and glasses sitting on a silver tray. He dropped silently onto the office floor, the thick carpet muffling the sound of his landing. He was inside the enemy stronghold, the silence pressing in on him. He moved quickly, his eyes scanning the room, searching for the safe. He located it behind a large painting of a racehorse, the irony not lost on him. He removed the painting, revealing the cold steel of the safe door. It was a modern safe, the combination digital, the keypad glowing softly in the dim light. Cracking the safe would take time he didn't have. He needed the combination. He searched the desk drawers, sifting through the papers, the files, the paraphernalia of Rousseau's life. He was looking for anything that might contain the combination. A notebook, a slip of paper, a hidden clue. He found a small, leather-bound notebook tucked away in the bottom drawer. He opened it, his eyes scanning the pages filled with cryptic notations, numbers, symbols, dates. He recognized the pattern. It was a code based on horse racing odds. The realization hit him like a jolt of electricity. Rousseau was a gambler, his life revolving around the track, the odds, the payouts. It made sense that he would use a code based on his obsession. He managed to decipher the combination, the numbers clicking into place in his mind. He punched the code into the keypad, his fingers trembling slightly. The safe clicked open, the heavy door swinging silently on its hinges. Liam's heart pounded in his chest. He was close. So close. He reached inside, his fingers brushing against the cold metal of the shelves. He saw it. A thick, leather-bound book, the pages filled with the secrets of Russo's empire. The ledger? He pulled it out, the weight of it feeling heavy in his hand. He opened it, his eyes scanning the pages, the entries detailing the payoffs, the bribes, the illegal bets. He found the entry for June 2001, the massive amount wagered, the subsequent loss, and a chilling notation. RM, cleanup fee, A and R. It was the smoking gun, the irrefutable proof that connected Russo to the murder. He closed the ledger, the satisfaction surging through him. He had done it. He had found the truth. He closed the safe, the door clicking shut. He replaced the painting, the room returning to its pristine state. He moved toward the door, the adrenaline still pumping through him. He just needed to get out, to escape with the ledger, to deliver it to Callahan. But as he reached the door, the handle turned. Someone was coming. Liam barely had time to react. He darted behind the heavy velvet curtains that covered the window, the fabric enveloping him in darkness. He stood frozen, his breath caught in his throat, the ledger clutched tightly in his hand. The office door opened, the light from the hallway spilling into the room. Vinnie Gallo entered, his imposing figure filling the doorway. He was alone. He seemed agitated, his movements jerky, his expression tense. He walked straight to the bar cart, pouring himself a generous glass of whiskey. He downed it in one gulp, the alcohol seemingly having little effect on his nerves. Liam watched him through a narrow gap in the curtains, his heart pounding in his chest. He was trapped, the only exit blocked by the man who had killed his brother. Gallo poured another drink, his gaze sweeping across the room. He seemed to sense that something was wrong, that the equilibrium of the space had been disturbed. And then he noticed it, the painting over the safe. It was slightly askew, the frame tilted by a fraction of an inch. His eyes narrowed, the suspicion hardening into certainty. He drew his weapon, a sleek black semi-automatic pistol, and approached the curtains. He knew someone was there. Liam realized he had no choice. He couldn't hide. He had to fight. He burst from the curtains, the adrenaline surging through him. He slammed into Gallo, the force of the impact sending them both crashing to the floor. A brutal, desperate fight ensued in the cramped office. It was a chaotic frenzy of violence, the silence of the room shattered by the sounds of the struggle. Liam fought with raw fury, the grief and the rage of the past 3 years fueling his movements. He was fighting for his brother, for justice, for his own survival. But Gallo was stronger, faster, trained in the art of violence. He fought with a cold, calculated brutality, his movements precise, efficient. He subdued Liam, his powerful hands wrapping around his throat, cutting off his air supply. Liam gasped for breath, his vision blurring, the darkness closing in. Gallo retrieved the ledger, the leather-bound book feeling heavy in his hand. He looked at Liam, his eyes cold, devoid of emotion. He sneered, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "Russo warned us you were stupid." The words hit Liam like a physical blow. The realization that he had failed, that the truth would remain buried, was devastating. Gallo pulled him up, his grip tightening on his arm. He dragged him toward the main club area, intending to take him out the back, to dispose of him quietly, efficiently. Liam struggled, his movements weak, futile. The despair threatened to overwhelm him. But then he saw it. The crowded club, the patrons oblivious to the drama unfolding in their midst. It was his last chance, his only hope. He had to create a diversion, a chaos that would allow him to escape. The fight wasn't over. Not yet. Gallo dragged Liam through the hallway, the noise of the club growing louder with each step. They entered the main room, the space crowded with patrons, the air thick with smoke and the smell of alcohol. The music pulsed, the laughter echoed, the atmosphere vibrating with an energy that felt surreal, dissonant. Liam realized this was his moment. He had to act now, before they reached the exit, before he disappeared into the night, another victim of Russo's brutality. He started shouting, his voice raw, desperate, cutting through the noise of the club. He killed Ryan Murphy, the jockey. Russo had him killed. The room went silent. The music stopped. The conversation ceased, the patrons turning to stare at the unfolding drama. The truth, raw and devastating, hung in the air. Gallo was stunned, the sudden shift in the power dynamic catching him off guard. He tried to silence Liam, his hand clamping over his mouth, but it was too late. The damage was done. In the chaos, the confusion, Liam saw his opportunity. He slammed his head back into Gallo's face, the impact sending a jolt of pain through his skull. Gallo staggered back, his grip loosening. Liam broke free, the adrenaline surging through him. He grabbed the ledger from Gallo's hand, the leather-bound book feeling like a lifeline. A tense chase ensued. Liam scrambled through the crowded room, the patrons scattering in panic. He knocked over a poker table, the chips flying, the money fluttering to the floor. The diversion created the chaos he needed. Gallo pursued him, his face contorted in rage, his weapon drawn. But the crowd hindered his movements, the confusion slowing him down. Liam reached the side exit, the door leading to a narrow alleyway. He burst through the door, the cold night air hitting him like a physical blow. He ran, his legs pumping, his lungs burning. He didn't look back. He just ran, the ledger clutched tightly in his hand, the sound of Gallo's shouts echoing behind him. He disappeared into the night, the darkness enveloping him, the city swallowing him whole. He had escaped. He had the ledger. He had the truth. He immediately headed for Callahan, the precinct a beacon of hope in the darkness. The relief was overwhelming, the exhaustion bone-deep. But the satisfaction, the sense of triumph, was stronger. He had done it. He had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. The fight was over. The justice was coming. Liam burst into the precinct, the ledger clutched in his hand, his clothes torn, his face bruised and bloody. Callahan looked up, his expression shifting from shock to relief. Liam delivered the ledger, the weight of it feeling heavy in his hand. It was the culmination of everything, the proof they needed. Callahan opened the ledger, his eyes scanning the pages, the entries detailing the vast criminal enterprise that Russo had built. It was irrefutable proof, the smoking gun that would bring him down. Armed with the ledger, Callahan moved swiftly. The ADA, confronted with the overwhelming evidence, had no choice but to authorize the warrants. Callahan led the raid on the social club and Russo's home. The atmosphere was tense, the anticipation electric. The NYPD moved with precision, overwhelming the security, securing the premises. Russo and Gallo were arrested, their reign of terror finally coming to an end. Russo was defiant, his expression cold, his eyes filled with hatred. Gallo was silent, his face impassive, his fate sealed. The trial was high profile, the media descending on the courthouse, the city captivated by the story of the murdered jockey and the criminal mastermind who had orchestrated his death. Liam watched from the gallery, the emotions swirling within him. He saw Mickey Doyle, Sammy Gallo, and David Chen testify, their voices trembling but resolute. They had found the courage to speak the truth, to confront the darkness that had haunted them for years. The ledger sealed the case. The defense tried to discredit the evidence, to paint Russo as a legitimate businessman, a victim of a conspiracy. But the proof was overwhelming, the truth undeniable. Russo and Gallo were found guilty of murder, racketeering, and illegal gambling. They received life sentences, their empires crumbling, their power evaporating. The verdict brought a sense of closure, a feeling of peace that Liam hadn't felt in years. The justice had been served. The fight was over. Liam visited Ryan's grave, the cemetery quiet, the air still. He placed a bouquet of flowers on the tombstone, the vibrant colors a stark contrast to the gray stone. The grief remained, a constant ache beneath the surface, but the unresolved anger was gone. He had found the answers, exposed the truth, and honored his brother's memory. He started the Ryan Murphy Foundation, dedicated to supporting young jockeys and promoting integrity in horse racing. He wanted to ensure that Ryan's legacy was defined not by the tragedy of his death, but by the honor he died for. He had found a new purpose, a new meaning in his life. He had transformed his grief into a force for good, his pain into a catalyst for change. The weight of the win had been heavy, the cost staggering. But in the end, the truth had prevailed, the light had overcome the darkness. And Ryan's spirit, his integrity, his unwavering commitment to justice lived on.